Trustee George,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here. All right. Well, I am first and foremost concerned about and committed to building a strong and vibrant community. And it's regrettable that the issues in the news this week have become an unfortunate distraction. Fox News created a big stir, misrepresenting decisions related to meeting protocols and appropriate conduct during the meeting's public comment period as a statement about the substance of the Pledge of Allegiance and First Amendment rights. I suggest we remain focused on the real issues facing our community. Tonight, this work session will focus on affordable housing and the emergency measure allowing RVs to be utilized for workforce housing. And our regular meeting on Monday, we will address meeting protocols and what's in the best interest of our community going forward. With that, let's move to our first agenda item. Housing policy with Beth Kramer.
Thank you. So with this session of the work session, I have a couple slides that I'd like to present with you today, but really it's going to be an open discussion around opportunities to further review with policy and programs that we have to offer. So I'll begin to share my screen. And if I could just get confirmation that you can see my PowerPoint.
We can.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to go first is into some of the regional support systems that we have, both as a town and for our community members. This was an ask during our last session during about a week ago. Then I'll go through some policies that I think can be reviewed by the town as opportunities to help with the workforce housing. Some programs that we have available to us in order to assist that, and go into some funding opportunities that we can also explore. And then kind of do a deep dive on Anvil and what the current status is at the moment and what we could potentially do as well. So again, this is meant to be an open discussion. So please, if you have questions, interject at any time. So going into our regional support, we're lucky to have 3 different nonprofit organizations and government agencies within our backyard that we can utilize and have gotten commitments that they are supporting us with our initiatives around workforce housing. The first one is the Colorado Housing and Financing Authority, also known as CHAFA. They offer homebuyer education and classes to those for both English and Spanish speaking, and also do home purchasing loans to individuals that are looking to do that. They offer grants and second mortgage loans for down payments and closing cost assistance for those that may not be able to find that full payment. And they also have loans and tax credits to build new and renovate existing multifamily housing units. A thing that I did want to point out is that they do have a program that they'll be kicking off in this coming October, which will be to provide technical assistance. It's a grant application at no cost or no matching required in order to do the pre-development work, so assessing what and where workforce housing can be done. So this is really a feasibility study on what makes sense and kind of making sure that those numbers play out for both, the developers and the community that'll be utilizing that. Information to reach them is on the screen, but I also want to say that we have a Southwest representative who is based in Durango. He actually came up to Silverton this morning and met with us for a little while and talked about some of these programs. And his name is Chris Lopez, gives us full support and will be there as we need for him in the coming months. The second one is Homes Funds. So they receive a lot of their funding through portions of the Division of Housing, but they also offer home buying educational classes. And then they have 3 different programs of mortgage assistance that are available to community members, depending on what their exact needs are. So depending on what type of obstacles they face, if it's entry obstacles, if it's down payment obstacles. So they're really looking to, again, help the community in order to enter into home purchasing options. The last one is housing solutions for the Southwest. Again, they're based, all of these are based in Durango, but have given support for our communities here in Silverton, San Juan County. They also do a lot of housing counseling for those that may already be in a housing, but are also having some maybe financial needs or obstacles in terms of, money management, or maybe they need help on doing reverse mortgages. So they're really there to help counsel those that have a house right now, but maybe having trouble finding those payments. They also have an emergency home rehab and repair loans, very, very low loans for those that may be needing emergency repairs, such as a roof repair that happened, or maybe a furnace goes out and just doesn't have the equity in order to do that replacement. So they're really good at offering options for those to work through those repairs quickly. And then they also provide technical assistance for workforce housing. Their director, Elizabeth, has again given support to our initiatives here in Silverton and is very happy to be involved in whatever capacity she needs. San Juan Development would like to create kind of a housing summit in the coming months, kind of bringing together these expertise and also our own community representatives to a session where we can all kind of get together and think about ways that we can support each other and opportunities that we can have moving forward. So if you guys, there's the contact information for all of these are here on the screen, but absolutely reach out to me if anyone wants to get connected or have more questions about these programs. So moving on to some policies that I think could be reviewed within the town on opportunities to help mitigate or incentivize workforce housing here. A lot of these are, again, to help those to develop housing and new build construction or even existing. And I want to preface by saying that, a lot of this is for developers, but we need to recognize that we also have a lot of community members in Silverton that also are looking to develop their own property. And we really need to take that into account and empower them as well to be able to financially sustain and support their building, but also do it in a way that's financially accessible to them. So a couple of policies that make, the obstacles to workforce housing a little bit less would be, the first is upzoning. So this is really a review of the restrictions or building restrictions or requirements that are needed right now. So examples of making it a little more accessible to workforce housing would be, lowering lot size requirements for different zones. You could increase building height restrictions, lowering the minimum building square footage, or decreasing setback requirements. These all, either way, allow different ways for workforce housing to have more opportunity to be developed in an economic way for those in the community. The second is expansion of multifamily residential districts. So there are a couple of districts or a couple of zones in Silverton right now that are zoned as single family residential. If those were to be reviewed and revisited for allowances for multi-units, that would obviously increase the amount of units that could be placed. If we had 10 open lots and you would allow duplexes on them, that's automatically 20 places that could potentially be workforce housing. The next is fast track permitting process. So this really prioritizes the workforce housing builds within the town by automatically bringing them to the front of the queue. Sometimes there can be a delay or, a line of already pre-existing permits in place, whether they're private or single family. This would make sure that the workforce housing developments get brought to the front. Of course, you'd have to put requirements and make sure that they were going to workforce housing and that there was a checks and balance there. But this is another way to kind of prioritize that type of construction here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Beth. I'm wondering if do we have that situation in Silverton? I know that Bill McDougall is not available tonight, but do you know if that's true for us or not?
I don't know. I'd have to refer to him.
Okay, thanks.
The next one would be our yes.
Beth, I'm just commenting that I believe Bill McDougall is here now.
Great. Bill, did you hear that question from Bill, can you hear us? Okay, well, maybe we'll revisit with him once he gets online.
Did you have a question for me? I'm sorry, I was muted.
No, sorry, Bill. I know that. Yeah, sorry. I know you're out of town and I don't mean to.
No, I'm sitting at my house.
Oh, you are? Oh,
No,
great.
I'm not out of town at all.
All right. Well, great. I'm sitting in my house too. I was just wondering if it's the case in Silverton that we have housing projects like in a queued up situation. Like, what's the building permit queue look like for us?
Well, yesterday I issued a permit in 2.5 hours for a
Okay.
single family residence. The longest I've ever, it's all, Lisa Darrow say, if you get the correct application turned in, it can go really quickly. So it really depends on the project, but rarely has it taken longer than 2 days.
Yeah, I remember ours going really fast too. So I was just curious
Yeah.
if that changed.
I mean,
Okay.
respectively, I don't think there's a problem with our permitting process, either fast tracking or a single permitting process. Although I think some of the other comments are really something worth looking at.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. So yeah, so moving on to the single permitting process, if it would be needed to be reviewed, this would help alleviate maybe some of that confusion if there is any confusion around submitting a permit. So having kind of a more guided application system, again, things to think about reviewing. Another one that I think is really reasonable is the waiver discount on fees or permits for construction. So these could be on permitting fees, variance fees, and sewer and water tap and investment fees. So just to give a perspective, right now, every new build requires a sewer, water tap, and investment fee of about $13,400. If you were to put a duplex on a lot, you would have to pay for that $13,400, but you would only need to put one tap on. So, but the second duplex would still need an investment fees for both of them. So that is still an amount of about $7,400. So right off the bat, any duplex that is going on will need about $20,000 upfront in order to pay for these sewer and investment fees. Now, just accentuate that by like a 3 or 4 unit house, you're easily getting into like $34,000 upfront. So some ways that towns work on this is either, waiving them entirely, the investment fees, or maybe doing a discount, or even doing a financing option where, instead of paying all of that upfront, it's paid over a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, whatever it is, time period in order to make that up. And then again, incentives for workforce housing. So looking at cash incentives for those that put deed restrictions onto their units, or tax abatement. So, maybe a different type of property tax that goes to those that have committed deed restrictions to workforce housing. Are there any further questions about these policies or clarifications I can make? Great. So some programs that are out there to help assist with this. We had a conversation with our Colorado Division of Housing representative earlier this week to talk about funding and grant options that could assist us in workforce housing development. He has indicated that the HDG grant option is what we would be interested in. And this can be used for both land acquisition and development costs. There is a matching requirement, but with that matching, you can either use property if you've already owned the property as the match, or funding, probably from a general fund. This is an open and rolling application. I think he said they currently have about $10 million invested in this grant, so there is opportunity for that. But it does take about 4 to 6 months for complete review once applying. So especially if you're looking at, doing something for the coming spring or winter, just keep that in mind, as this is kind of the time period it takes for them to receive the application, go through the underwriting, go through the reviews, allocate the grant. And a good thing to know about that is they accept multiple applications for towns and cities. So if we wanted to explore, if the town of Silverton wanted to explore a land acquisition grant moving forward in the near future, we could also eventually work on a development grant as we were going through these technical needs assistance. So we don't have to only be restricted to one at all. We can definitely have options. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that the USDA also has some options. They have a direct home loan program, again, a little bit more focused to individuals, but does have the opportunity to help out with those developers and assisting people into houses. There is a mutual self-help program run through the SDA. Our local resource is with the Housing Resources for Western Colorado. They're located in Grand Junction, and we will be meeting with them in the next coming week or so, just to see what their program is and if it could be viable here in Silverton. And then they also really have a lot of different infrastructure improvement loans and grants. The reason why I bring this up is that sometimes that can be the restriction on getting workforce housing developed, is that there's no sewer lines or water lines going out to different parts of town. So you have this availability as well to look at, how can we actually create the infrastructure for those so that come develop, do that without having to then do also the infrastructure as well. Any questions on these? Great. Go ahead. Trustee
So,
Barilla?
anybody that has tried for these USDA loans for the infrastructure improvements, just how would that really work? Since we don't have a lot of available land in town, most of it is in county, how would that work for us?
I know that the USDA was part of some of the grant funding that the county had. I just don't know the details, but I can definitely look into that a little bit more and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. And next, I just kind of want to walk you through Anvil, because I think a lot of people look at Anvil and just don't know exactly what's going on there at this moment. So let me kind of give you the background and different opportunities that we have there. So Anvil is comprised of mixed uses of lots in order to build different opportunities for people. So what you see in my screen, these are yellow, these 13 restricted residency lots. So these are market rate lots that are sold at $30,000 a lot. And the only restriction on them is that you must be a full-time resident in Silverton. So it can't be a vacation home. It has to be a primary residence. These are all called for. There are currently houses going up on them, and there'll be more this summer. And there is even a waiting list for them right now. What you'll see now in the blue are 10 affordable lots. So these are available to those with restrictions that they have an income of 125% AMI, which is the average medium income, and they are single family units. Excuse me. Anvil is currently working with a local contractor here in town in developing those lots. There are 2 on those right now with 2 families in them. And then you'll see right here in the red, that is where the current Anvil apartments are. There are 12 units on the Anvil apartments. 4 of them are market rate. So again, the only restriction is that you have to be a full-time resident. And the remaining 8 do have some level of AMI restriction from 80% down to 30%. Right now, they are all full. Now, what is open are the rest of the lots. These 5 pink lots that you can see the arrows going to, those are planned for multi-unit construction. So condominiums, townhouses, something that would be built but then sold to an owner and be privately owned. On this is another multi-unit lot. Again, be able to be built, maybe condominiums, and then sold to private owners. We have 3 executive lots. These lots are a little bit bigger. They're in the trees, if you have an idea of what Anvil looks like. They are not developed yet. They don't have a plan for development. So one thing to note is that they do not have infrastructure running to them right now. So the rest of the lots on Anvil do have water and sewer lines, but these do not. So that would be something to consider. And then we have a developable parcel across the street, across 550, about 3.5 acres, I believe. There is a little bit of easement that needs to be done with CDOT. There's also a wetlands on there that would need to be studied on part of the land. And then there would also need to be infrastructure brought out there. So the available building right now is within these pink lots, this orange lot, these green lots, and this magenta lot. With the county's DOLA grant that they received for the development of Anvil, there is a restriction on AMI. So of all the lots that need to be built, 60% of those lots need to be 125% or lower AMI. And of that 60%, 30% of that needs to be 80% or below AMI. So even though so what I'm saying is that there's flexibility in where those are distributed. So it's not specifically, this has to be this amount, this has to be that amount. It's just an overall understanding of this is the requirements, which part of the housing study that we're currently doing with the Southwest Council of Colorado will give us a better outlook of what is actually needed in our town. And that's all I had. I'm open to discussion or questions as needed.
Beth, I just had a quick question. Has anyone researched what an estimated cost of infrastructure into the developable parcel, or like what that would look like? Or is there background on infrastructure to Anvil that you can tell us about?
I can't tell you about that right now. I don't know if one has been done. I can definitely check with the county to see if that assessment was done when Anvil was, initially planned, but I don't have that.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So I'll take that as a note for sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Beth, do you happen to know what the current AMI is for Silverton and San Juan County?
Yes, but it may take me a second to get that. So
It'd be fine to follow up with that later. I'm just curious so that people know what that 125% or below is, so that they know whether or not this is something they'd qualify for.
absolutely. Let me also get back into that.
Yeah, and I had a follow-up to that, Mayor Furman, too. I just was reading a document, I think that we received in our town email from a CAST study, mountain migration report, and it indicated a recommendation or the idea that communities research their AMI and make a determination whether or not that's currently serving them. and I didn't read it I haven't read it really carefully, but I just wondered if you have information on, along with Mayor Furman's question, like if our formula or if the way we evaluate that or look at that needs to change in some way.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, Mayor Furman, part of the information that I've received from the county, AMI is definitely based on the amount of people within the household. So for an example, one person, 120% AMI, you're looking at 61,800 a year. Two person, that goes to 70,000. Versus an AMI of one person at 80%, that's 41%. Or $41,000 a year. So I can send this information, this chart for over so that you can look at this at your own time as well. For the second question, I know that what we've been doing is been pulling data from the Colorado State dashboard. And they actually are overseeing those types of equations and doing the analysis on it. And that's what we're using as well in order to supplement the housing study in order to understand like what those restrictions are. So I'm happy to send that link over and you can kind of go through all that data. I believe it's updated annually.
It looks like Trustee George has a question.
Yes, I was wondering, do you all have any experience with, or have you looked into tax increment financing to add infrastructure to some of these undeveloped areas? TIF, I guess it's known as.
So with that, there are a lot of restrictions because of Tabor and what we can and cannot do. So I think it needs to be reviewed a little bit more in detailed by probably your town attorney, because a lot of that stuff and Tabor specifically calls out increments used for housing transfer costs. So like putting a tax if there's like a closing or transfer of property. So it gets a little bit complicated in that. So definitely happy to have that conversation, but right now, the initial study that we've done, I don't know if it's accessible for us.
Sure, and in my research that I've done into it, it was less for housing development itself and more for the infrastructure around it. It made it sound like it was easier to be used for water, sewer, streets, parking, etc. But I was just wondering if that was something that we could maybe use or look into in the future.
Let me definitely do that.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Fulmer, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead, Bill.
How much input are you looking for from staff with ideas and thoughts on this, or are we just doing a brief study? Because some of the items that Beth has put up here, we've had some extensive discussions over the past couple of years about, and I'm not sure how much of it has been brought to the board's attention just because of the changes of administrators. And I'd be happy to do about a 3-minute, and I mean 3-minute maximum, discussion on something that was brought to the attention if you wish.
That sounds like a great idea to me, but I'll kick that out to the whole board and Administrator Kochberger just for a thumbs up. Cool. That sounds like go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to go back to the map that was just up there. Unfortunately, it went away on my screen.
I'm sorry.
So guys, let's talk about Anvil Mountain. Since I work for the county, I have some knowledge about this. And I'm looking at the 5 multi-unit lots that Beth has got these arrows running to, okay? Are we all on board with what I'm talking about? Yes, thank you. I reviewed those over a couple of years ago and came up with an idea that hasn't been forwarded, but that land belongs to the county. I think we all know that. And really, if we're dealing with affordable housing and it's adjacent to the town, whether it's county-owned property or town-owned property, in my opinion, working together would accomplish something that could be done quickly. Each one of those parcels right now could have a 3-unit townhome built on it. They would be vertical, 2 stories. They would not be large, under 1,000 square feet. Might or might not have a garage. You know, I'm not talking about design necessarily. But if the town was willing to subsidize some of those construction costs, each unit could probably be built for somewhere around 200,000. If the town came up with a way, if the county would donate the land to the town with the idea that the town would build some units on here, 3 townhomes in each one of these, if the town subsidized 50K each, could be sold for 150K. And I think that would throw it a big hat into the affordable housing thing. These aren't numbers I'm making up, guys. These are factual numbers. It would take cooperation between the town and the county to get the lots, but the town would not have to go very far to subsidize this. You sell the property, you regain your investment income minus the difference between what someone would qualify for, say 150,000 and the overall construction cost. It's doable. It's doable quickly. It could be done next summer. Thank you for your time.
Is that something that perhaps staff could put together a memo relating to for, you know, further discussion?
Sure.
Awesome.
You're looking for instantaneous stuff that's quick. This is quick. It works. It can be done. The funds are available.
Mr. McDougall, is there any reason why it hasn't happened already? Are there barriers that we're not?
Yeah, but I'm not going to discuss that in a public meeting.
Okay, so it's doable.
Of course, it should have been done. It could have been done 2 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
This project was presented to administrator 2 years ago. They just never went up the ladder, and I never felt comfortable talking directly, but it's time to kind of, shall we say, get something done. And guys, this is stuff that can be done. This is a shovel-ready land, infrastructure installed. We waived the hookup fees, which were already going to be waived and paid for by the county anyway. We built some structures down there, get them designed correctly, put them on the market. If this is planned accordingly, I don't see any reason these couldn't be available to be sold by the middle of next summer or in that general time frame.
Bill, what size are all these lots?
Well, we're roughly, I don't have that calculation in front of me. We're talking 3 townhomes stacked in the middle together. A townhome being a purchase property, you would have a little front yard, a little backyard. These lots are roughly 100 by 50, roughly, about the size of 2 city lots. You guys all have seen stacked townhomes in both old cities areas and new things. It's a very effective way to build a certain amount of square footage without a lot of construction costs because you're tying buildings together, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Bill. Trustee Bierma?
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks, Bill. That was great input on that. And my question's kind of going back page, because I see a big hurdle for us being that there's a lot of construction in town, but it's not necessarily a lot of construction that's going to workforce housing or going to people who's going to have it as their primary residence. Have there been any good examples of people opting into that deed restriction? So for example, like, I see that we have the deed restriction in Anvil of being a full-time resident. And I guess, are there any examples of good cash incentive programs or tax programs that other places have used to get people to opt into those deed restrictions?
I think the ones that we see very often is just a reduction in property tax, or what they're paying, or any sort of like fees that else would have to be incurred with the property or building. There are some communities that are just in such a state of emergency that they've found that they now have to put on some sort of kind of restrictions, so like penalties against those that aren't using houses for workforce housing and instead letting them stay vacant all year. But I think that really needs to be kind of like a worst case scenario, that first you start with incentivizing and empowering the community and kind of giving them, you know, access to do this. And that's mostly what I've seen is just like property taxes or maybe like waiving of fees. Breckenridge, sorry, I think Breckenridge, I told you all about this last time. They actually did do like a cash advancement on houses that were changed to deed restrictions. And that was a basis on the market value of that house. So that was like a percentage. I do have a message in with the city planner of Breckenridge because she was the one that organized this to get the details. Still waiting on that call, and I'll keep trying to get those details coming as possible. Trustee
Barilla.
So the reason I asked Bill, because I started looking at some blueprints and plans that are available now, very much would fit in with the structure of town. I found one here for 4,535 square feet, 3-car garage. Each one has an individual garage, triplex, 71 foot wide, 43 foot deep, 6 bathrooms, 9 bedrooms, 2 stories. And these plans are just simple things available on the internet at the moment. So I'm sure there's quite a lot more that could be developed. And that was based on what you said, the approximate size was 100 by 50. So with that 43 deep, is that enough for all of the setbacks that we would need? Have you actually looked at plans for any of this?
Are you asking me that question, Molly?
Yes, Bill.
I'm sorry. I've not looked at those specific plans, and I would have to take measurements and setbacks since the town would and the county would be owning the property together. I think probably those, I mean, it's a question of how much land do you want to give somebody in the form of a townhouse for a yard of how big a structure you want to build. I think I might recommend something a little smaller than that, just because that's a fairly large structure, but that's the concept. Exactly what you're talking about is the exact concept, Molly. You know, again, without having specifics in front of me, I can't answer that exactly, but that concept is exactly what I was thinking about as far as 3 townhomes. Townhomes, as you guys know, are separate deeded pieces of property and ownership to each individual. They're not a condo. They're not rental apartments. They're simply homes that have married walls.
Yeah, shared common walls. Yeah. I'll forward you this, Bill, so you can take a look at some of these.
Thanks.
Beth, going back to Trustee Birma's question, in addition to the Breckenridge specifics that you were going to look up, would you be able to provide us with some examples of other specific tax incentive programs and other opt-in deed restriction programs to see if there's anything that really fits this community?
I will. So the Director of Housing Solutions for the Southwest is pretty familiar with different policies and programs that have worked, especially within our region and other mountain towns. So let me get back with her next week again and see if she can provide more details on those.
Awesome. And kind of similarly, I saw at the last presentation, you mentioned rehabilitation tools for properties that may be run down or that are inefficient. And I saw in the earlier slide, the emergency home rehabilitation loans from the Housing Solutions for the Southwest. And I was wondering if there were any other rehabilitation tools out there, because we do have a lot of historic structures, and it would be cool to find programs that we could offer to the community for rehabbing those historic structures.
Yeah, so that's going to be the main one, especially for like a private owner. That's actually given from the Colorado Division of Housing, just through Housing Solutions for the Southwest. So they're kind of the one that distributes that. I also referenced in our last meeting that there are 2 bills that are currently going through the Colorado State Senate. One of those bills is focused on rehabilitation of buildings into workforce housing. I don't know the exact details, and we won't know what exactly will come out of it until the fall when it'll go to the Senate. But I think those are going to be probably the best options that we have right now. I do know, just to add, I do know that CHAFA, the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, they also have some options and programs for emergency loans. They're more historic, or what you would think of a loan is as well. So not necessarily like emergency, but still focused on preservation and rehabilitation.
Great. Any other trustee questions or feedback? Or staff questions or feedback?
One more, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say one more thing before, if we close.
Please go.
Okay. We didn't really talk about this other multi-unit lot over here. I know that there has been some assessment of building, potential another apartment complex on there. It could have, another 6, 8, 10 apartments that could go in there. Again, with a variety of different income restrictions as appropriate. You don't want to become property owners at the end of the day. You want to maybe sell them as condominiums, as I said before. These could also be another solution and something that we could explore. I don't know if it's gone into the depth that Bill has mentioned before with the 5 multi-unit spots, but definitely keep that in mind that this orange one as well has been talked about becoming another apartment complex, and you could sell those as condominiums to either private people or even to businesses, and then businesses could have a dedicated place to put their employees.
Great. This is inspiring. I really like this moving towards action sort of in a specific way that relates to our town. I like that we've taken that, we're zooming in a little bit. And this really relates to kind of a process question, I guess, for it might be for Administrator Koshberger or just for the board of like, what direction do we need to give, or what is the action for us to take to, be one step closer to building some of these units, or what do we need to do there?
Oh, thank you. So I think moving forward, what we can do is put together a memo on those 5 multi-unit spaces for you all, so that you have that information, and putting it on maybe our next, not the 28th, but after that agenda for discussion for motions to move forward. So giving you some options in that memo to move forward with on I think that would probably be one of the steps forward. There are a couple of grant opportunities that Beth and I have, she forwarded to me earlier from USDA. So I think I'm anticipating quite a few memos coming your way here soon on these topics. And then also reaching out to the county with that first one, just to kind of talk about those next steps moving forward. So we've got our work cut out for us on the staff side on this, and this has been a great, I like that you guys are moving forward with this, so thank you.
Awesome. I think to just jump on that a little bit even further, it sounds like we kind of have 3 directions to continue, and I like that each of these presentations and work sessions kind of focus us a little bit more. The first is what Administrator Koshberger just described with the Anvil development and funding and structure of the county. 2, it sounds like Beth is going to look more into incentives for workforce and affordable housing or primary residence and full-time housing, like deed opt-ins and restrictions. And then a third one that seems less urgent, but is lurking and has come up each time that we've talked about this is infrastructure development funding. So how can we make more of the developable land affordable to develop by figuring out how to fund the infrastructure portion of it? But that seems like truly tertiary to the other two more urgent items.
Mayor Berman, may I add something?
Oh, of course.
There's also the possibility of looking at land acquisition right now as well, because that's an opportunity with Division of Housing. And like I said, it could be another grant. We don't have to be restricted to one application. So if you're interested in looking at potential land acquisitions for maybe future workforce housing and making sure that this is a sustainable program, I would just add that potentially.
Sounds like a great addition. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Okay, and I had one other addition, but I don't want it to overwhelm more immediate action items. But I'm kind of back on that sort of paperwork direction of policies about or zoning and code revisions and rewriting, or I'm not sure how we, again, I don't want to overwhelm staff with this, but I think, you know, if we were to look at one or two sort of top priority zoning or I don't know if zoning is the right word, or just sort of like housing policy ordinances that we might want to review and pass that can be effective.
If that's something that the board wants, I would just need the support of staff to go through that work. Town Administrator Kirschberger, and I'm not sure what your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think we can add that on to the list. It's not too much to ask. We can definitely add that on. On like just kind of, and so just for clarification, you're asking for just like kind of policies that we can implement now in order to move forward. Okay. Yes.
Well, great. Any other questions before we move on to our next item? All right, awesome. Thank you, Beth. That was super helpful, and it feels like we made some good progress.
Great, I appreciate that and look forward to helping with this initiative. Please reach out if you need anything, and I'll work with the town and staff in order to get this stuff back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
All right, our second item tonight is the Workforce RV Housing Ordinance, and I will pass the microphone over to Administrator Koschberger.
Sure. So we're here tonight to clarify some of the ambiguities in our municipal code concerning RVs, and really defining this for staff and for our community moving forward on, you know, thinking about workforce housing, thinking about our current state of where we're at with our workforce. So just kind of keeping that in mind as we go through these ordinances, these questions about the ordinance that are a little ambiguous. So I'm going to, you all had a packet sent to you, and this was actually included in our let's see, meeting from the 28th. With the different options in there. So kind of thinking about, you know, each one of these questions and how they relate back to this code. And it is ambiguous on how it can be interpreted. So we are looking to the board, staff is looking to the board for these policy decisions on how to interpret this policy. So just kind of giving you that overview as we dive in. And we do have Director Adair here to answer any questions or support as we move forward. But I'll kind of kick it off here. So what we're looking at is, we'll just start with this first question, unless you all have questions about kind of the intent of moving forward with this. Just questions. Okay, just checking. Okay, so the first question is, can a seasonal employee RV be parked and occupied on a vacant parcel, or must there be an existing residential structure or dwelling unit on the parcel where the occupied RV is located? And this question leads into the other three questions, so keep that in mind as we go forward. And Adair put this together pretty straightforward. She gave kind of two options to this because it is ambiguous. So our first option is a seasonal employee RV can be parked and occupied on a vacant parcel, or a seasonal employee RV can only be parked and occupied on a parcel which has an existing residential structure or unit. And I would open it up to discussion for that, unless Director Adair had anything to add as far as context to that question. Molly, or sorry, Trustee Barella.
So my name is Molly. That's fine. Okay, so my question in this, if the person on the piece of vacant land has the necessary documentation to be utilizing the RV, what would it matter if it was vacant or not? Because we're trying to solve a short-term or a long-term problem with a short-term solution. That's why this whole thing was developed. So if that property is a friend of theirs, or whatever, it doesn't even matter the context of how they're being able to use that land. If they qualify under the other sections that we said, you've got to be working in town and you're here to be workforce for the community. How does that actually matter on vacant land? I want these. Thank you.
And I would say, Trustee Barella, that is an excellent question. And this is why we are coming to you all for this kind of policy guidance here. I know that, as staff, we've talked about this, and our recommendation would be that, we allow this for 2021 and then revisit this. But that's kind of, since it is kind of immediate right now, but this is definitely your all decision on how you'd like to move forward.
Sorry, is somebody else going?
No, you're
Okay.
on the floor.
What's the benefit of a structure versus not a structure? Or what's the concern of structure versus no structure? What are we talking about?
Director Adair, did you want to take this one?
I can address that, or Lisa. Okay, you're on.
I think historically, this ordinance, which predates all of the town staff, it's been interpreted that to have a seasonal employee RV parked on your land, it has to be next to a house. And that is what's described in the whereas section. It says that the RV needs to be on or adjacent to occupied residential property. But if you actually read the adopted text on the second page, under restrictions, section C, it just says private property. So it's, in the past, this ordinance has been interpreted to require a house. But if you actually read the fine print of what is written and adopted, it appears to me that vacant parcels would be eligible for a seasonal employee RV. I don't know what the original intention was a long time ago when this was written, but for years, the town staff has been telling people you can only park a seasonal employee RV on your parcel if you have a house. If your parcel's vacant, you can't do it. If you really look at the fine print, it doesn't actually say that. So we're wondering what the town board intended long ago.
So it seems pretty clear that it's just a quick pros cons question, and the pros of allowing it on vacant land without a house adjacent is that we can have more of them, so we'd be able to provide more housing. I'm not aware of any cons, but I'm wondering if others could let me know if they're aware of any cons. Is there, a concern? Yeah, Lisa?
One thing that would be unusual is a vacant parcel usually does not have any water tap. And that's part of the reason why we're suddenly getting a lot of requests for water taps.
Wouldn't that bring more income to the town to allow that?
It would. And then I think I was approached by Public Works because they're getting checks for taps and the town staff wasn't sure how we should be interpreting this ordinance that predates all of us, if it's being interpreted correctly, or maybe there's revisions that you want to see. And then this ties into if I have a house on one lot and I have 10 vacant lots, can I have 10 RVs, put in 10 taps? So this all ties together with that. Is historically, anybody that has a vacant parcel is not considered eligible for this ordinance. And suddenly we're getting some requests for that. And is that okay with the town board for us to okay that, or should we tell people no?
So to just say that a different way, is the concern about accidentally creating unlicensed temporary private RV parks?
Absolutely agree with that statement, Mayor.
Trustee Barella, you had your hand up.
So mine, Bill kind of led right into that. But I don't know, if you continually make sure that everybody understands this is just a gap fill measure, that within, say, a year, if Mr. McDougall's plans and all of this can really work for the town and the county and those parcels in our previous discussion, then we're going to kind of take away that ability for this to continue. It was put in perpetuity to make sure we didn't have to constantly go back and revisit it, because it's just a stopgap. It's just right now. So if you get the tap money and it happens for maybe 2 seasons while we're trying to push for better housing for actual people, and then we rescind it, then you've got people who we're like, well, you used to let me do this and now you don't. So we need to make sure that if we do continue to allow this, that people completely are aware that this is a temporary solution until we can move forward with bigger and better projects. Or once the bigger and better projects are complete, this will go away. It was just a stopgap measure.
Mayor, can I comment on a couple items here?
Yeah, of course, please.
Two things. I think one thing that I hate to let's just say this ordinance is written while I was working for the town, and I believe Molly was on the board and possibly Jess too. This doesn't go back that many years. And initially it was a stopgap and it was only seasonal, and then it was turned into, it was renewed every year, and then it was turned into a permanent thing. I think one of the issues that Molly's bringing up pardon me, Councilmember Barella is bringing up.
My name is Molly.
My name is Bill, is sewer and water taps. People paying a lot of money to get their water tapped. And then Molly's talking about this may be going away, which ideally, I don't think anybody on this board wants to see our town as an open RV park, which is in essence what this could create. And it's difficult to come up with a way to balance this. And that's something I just wanted to make sure that you board members understand, that we're going to look like an RV park all over town. If I owned an RV park and was paying commercial property taxes and everything associated with that particular endeavor, that might be something that I would want to be sure the town board had a grasp on, a sunset on this. And if somebody's coming in and paying $13,400 for a sewer and water tap, they're going to keep paying that when there's no RVs on that property. That gets billed to them permanently. And so if that gets changed a year or two, hopefully some other workforce housing situation comes together and you sunset this thing, those men and women are still paying for those taps. So there's a lot of moving parts to what you decide tonight on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee George?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with what Bill and Molly just said as far as making sure that we let anybody that does this know that this is going to be, for a limited time. We hope in future that we'll have enough workforce housing. But returning to the question of whether or not people can park their RVs on property adjacent, what is the definition of adjacent? Can they put it just on lots without houses? I think that we should do that just because of the shortage of workforce housing that we have. And then we need to just rely on the other verbiage in the ordinance to make sure that the people that are doing it are doing it legally. And that is, the documentation, employer verification, authorization by the property owner, et cetera. And that should take care of to make sure that the people that are doing it there are there because they are part of the workforce and they're using it for that reason.
I think kind of similar to that verification and thinking about how this is administered, something I noticed that I was curious to ask if there's any history about is I didn't see anything about money anywhere in this ordinance in terms of like fees for the permit to the town, any prohibition on charging rent to the RV camper by the landowner or adjacent property owner. And I was just curious if there was a reason that this doesn't say anything one way or the other, because it seems like someone could actually, like I think leaning towards the accidentally creating an unlicensed RV park, we would as a town be incentivized to say that you can't charge rent or rent would be capped at a certain amount so that people can't turn this into a little side hustle business of renting the space around their property. But I don't know if we want to incentivize that or we don't. I'm just curious what the history is.
I'll speak on that. History, it was just done as a way of filling in the gap temporarily and then became permanent. But money was never discussed. There's no charge for the permit from the town. And it's to provide for workforce housing. But I do think if we get farther along tonight, there's another big question. It's actually question 2. And that is how many RVs are going to be allowed on either a raw piece of property or adjacent piece of property. And if you're just talking one, and the person has to pay a couple $100 to help offset water and trash costs, that's one thing. But if you move forward with this question, that might be something that has to be brought up. And that is, we're talking the ordinance goes into 2,500 square foot per RV. If I own 8 lots, do I get 8 RVs in my own mini non-licensed, non-permanent RV park?
Trustee Uyghur?
So I feel like we've given a lot of the business owners a free pass with this ordinance for a long time in hopes that they would step up and do something a little bit more permanent. I feel like if we allow people to start putting RVs on all these empty lots, that we're disincentivizing the ability to build a year-round permanent structure. And I think that also is promoting the seasonality of our workforce within Silverton. I think we need to look towards more permanent housing solutions. And I understand that this is an issue and has been brought to the forefront this year more than anything, but I really don't want us to go ahead and keep expanding these free passes. I think if we do allow people to put taps in on single lots, that we should do something to incentivize them to build a permanent structure there eventually within the next 3 or 5 years or something like that.
I think that's a great idea, Jeff. I'm going to come at this from a completely personal standpoint. I actually did try to buy some property very close to my building so I could make workforce housing directly near me. And anyway, and the deal fell through. That's not the big deal. But I utilized this one summer for one employee, and it did really help. It helped her more than anything because it didn't cost her much to live. So she's now a permanent resident in town, doesn't actually utilize this camper that she had anymore. So it does make a difference, but the availability of the land right now for business owners too is not that great. And buying down at Anvil and that kind of thing, yeah, we've looked at that. But my husband and I are considerably older, and is it a long-term goal for us? Maybe if I was younger, Jess, I would have to say yes. But when that land deal fell apart near me, we kind of said, well, maybe we don't want to do that. So it's kind of a catch-22 from the business perspective too, because we were gung-ho to do it about 2 years ago. So.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Uyghur on this one. It feels like it's a Band-Aid ordinance, and it's kind of a crappy Band-Aid that just keeps falling off and like not really working. And I agree, like I want to make this the stretchiest, most durable Band-Aid possible. Like we want to make the ordinance clear, and we want to we have an immediate need in the community, and we don't want to, we want individuals who are here this summer to have housing and for businesses to be able to use that as an option. But I do really agree that this is not something that I really want to support long-term because of just how it encourages the seasonality of this workforce housing, and that tap fees and infrastructure on this vacant land may reduce the supply. If once a person has a tap and they have a system worked out, there's not much of a motivation to put that property sort of into the supply of available land for business owners. So I agree that making this work as well as it can for the staff this year is important, and that going forward, that it's not something to really bolster or make any better.
Trustee George?
Yeah, and I agree with all of that, and especially what has just been said about seasonal employees. I'd love to see, year-round workforce and year-round housing. That being said, this is a problem that we're dealing with, and it's almost July. And I do know a lot of business owners in town who are still looking for employees and they can't get because they don't have a place to live. So I hope that maybe we can do something to help just for this season. And then as far as putting infrastructure And, if somebody puts, a water tap onto their property, and we've made it very clear that this ordinance is going away, that this won't be here next year, then it actually becomes in their best interest to put something else on that land, a building or something that they could then rent, rather than just paying their tap fee and not having anything there. So maybe it could work the exact opposite way. I'm not sure, obviously, but it's just an idea. But I think the main point is we're almost in July, and we should do something to alleviate the issue now.
I have a question for whoever knows the answer. How long at the Anvil lots did someone have from purchase to when they're required to build? Because my understanding is that those are restricted with a time frame 2 years. Would it be overly burdensome to say that if you put a tap on vacant land in order to access this ordinance, then you have to develop in 2 years? Is that creating too much of a restriction on land in town?
Mayor and board, that might be a question that would have to be run by the town attorney as to the legality of that. May I offer just some general constructive thoughts about what you guys have been talking about? I agree with what everybody's saying, especially about the need being immediate that Tyler was just mentioning. And I think possibly making it clear to us that if we allow an RV to be on owned property with permission from the landowner that doesn't have a structure on, that's grandfathered whenever the winter kicks in here, October 15th or whatever it is on this ordinance, for this year only. And that covers what Tyler was talking about as far as needing something immediately. It's almost July. The other big question in the next one is, how many do you get to put on your property? If you own 4 lots, do you get 4? Or is it just 1 RV per lot ownership or parcel ownership? I really think that that's something we really need clarity from you guys about. But one way I might suggest that would be a combination of allowing it quickly this year to cover that in need, would be you get 1 RV per parcel ownership. If you own 6 lots, you get 1 RV. If you own 2 lots, you get 1 RV. If you own a house on 2 lots and you can meet the setbacks, you get 1 RV. That would be a way of not turning our town into an RV park, and yet still, I think, providing adequate amount of lots to satisfy the need. Molly, if I'm wrong here, let me know, but I believe it would. And it might help clear up what's happening now. It would give us some direction on staff where to go. And I think it might satisfy the need for the balance of 2021.
Yeah, I like that, Bill. And you're the boots on the ground. You're the one who should be really telling us what you've seen, what you know is going on, why these problems have arisen, because we're going to rely on what information we get from staff, because I don't know. Like I said, I only utilized it once in all these years. But I like the idea of just saying, hey, it's not meant to look like an RV park on your property, because we don't really want that. It's just a stopgap.
Trustee Burrell, I think you muted yourself.
I did. I was done talking. I think Bill has the knowledge, because he is the guy who sees this every day. He's called to the different locations. He knows exactly what's going on. We actually don't. I mean, we have to take and trust staff to bring this to our attention and to give us the correct direction, because they see it every day.
Well, again, I'd just like to state that I'm not trying to in any way suggest that the ordinance itself is just not clear. As you guys know, you've read it, and we're just looking for some guidance. And those suggestions that we have come up with as staff, we can easily incorporate that as the I'm not sure I have the proper word, as the interpretation of the way this ordinance is. We can allow it to be on empty lots for 2021 only. We can restrict it to 1 RV per ownership parcel. And then there's a third question here that Lisa brought up that's very important. And that to me this is one of the tough ones. What is adjacent property? What is property? If you own 8 lots with an alley in between it, is that 2 separate parcels? Is that 1 parcel? Is that what's an adjacent parcel? If it's divided by a public right of way, does that mean it's 2? That's another situation that we're running across also.
Lisa.
Hey, Lisa, help me. Yeah.
I wanted to mention that this conversation is about interpreting the existing adopted ordinance. And then the second part would be if you want to pursue changes to what's written. So what we should focus on right now is looking at what's already adopted. And that is what we should have these people comply with, is the words that are actually adopted. And then perhaps you'd like to see some clarifications or changes made to this ordinance, which we can do. And so the questions in the staff report should be answered looking at the fine print of what's already on the books legally adopted in 2020-02.
I think I'd like to ask a question about that suggestion, which is if the purpose of the discussion is to interpret the ordinance, I think we just have to kick that to the attorney. I don't think any of us are qualified to interpret the ordinance with respect to these specific questions as a legal matter. But I think if the idea is to interpret the intent and what's best in these conditions, and then to revise if necessary based on the attorney's analysis of the ordinance and what we give direction for right now, I think we can do that. So I just want to clarify that, because I don't think any of us should be interpreting this specifically. Administrator Koschberger, does that sound like what we should be doing, or do you have further direction?
Yes, I think it's so these are more kind of, and I'll say it again, it's more policy. So the interpretation, and maybe that is the wrong word to be using here, but in reality, the way the ordinance is written does not clarify these points. And so we are wondering like how to clarify them. So I'm not saying that we would need the attorney yet. Of course, after this is done, absolutely. But kind of giving us direction on how we should clarify the ordinance. I don't know if interpretation is the right word here.
Okay, so it sounds like, unless people object, the consensus so far sounds like on the first question that we're okay with vacant parcels, but only this year. And that's kind of supplemented by the second question, which is that Bill's suggestion that we would only want 1 per parcel. We still need to talk about what a parcel is based on Bill and Lisa's follow-up question. And I guess just based on like putting a pause right there in terms of what we've done so far and what the follow-up would be, the question would be, with that direction, would the ordinance need to be further revised or clarified pursuant to a recommendation by the attorney? And I think that's how we could proceed for the last 2 questions as well, if that all sounds good to everybody.
Yes, Mayor Furman, I think that's kind of the direction that we're headed.
Great, awesome.
Can I ask a quick question? So what I believe I hear the board suggesting is that we go ahead and we can make it clear that this is only going to be for 2021. And so whatever happens this year is not necessarily going to be, this ordinance may be restructured with new wording that would be in effect for 2022. Am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
So just kind of recapping what Jess and Sally seem to say, I think the idea is to provide guidance to people applying for utilizing this ordinance, that we will try to be trimming this back as additional housing options become available in the future.
I guess I just have a big question, and that is that according to the current ordinance, you can put an RV on 2,500 square feet. If we're not going to have some guidance from you guys this evening on that, then that means if someone owns 6 lots, they have 6 RVs on it.
Oh, I don't think we're done having the conversation, Bill. So
I'm sorry.
You know,
I
all good.
misunderstood what you're saying.
Oh, I was just saying, just to clarify how far we've gotten to, and pausing after questions 1 and 2, we'll move on to the rest of the conversation for sure. I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on what we were doing and how it related to the ordinance as drafted versus revisions to the ordinance by the attorney later. As with most of the things we get lost in, like these feel like pretty complex process issues as well as substantive ones. So I think I was talking more about process than substance, and then I was recapping our conversation in terms of substance.
Okay, and then just a follow up. So like Bill said, if the ordinance says now that you can have an RV on 2,500 square feet, then wouldn't we have to change the ordinance immediately to make it so you couldn't put 8 RVs on however many lots he had said?
Exactly. And that
require a change tonight.
Yeah, and that's what I was clarifying, that we're not we need to know if we're limiting the conversation to interpreting the ordinance as drafted, or if we're having a conversation about what we'd like this to say and then asking the attorney to change it.
Okay.
And that's a question for this board to determine. It sounded to me, based on the conversation, that people want to potentially revise the ordinance to reflect the suggestions by staff and this conversation. Mayor Pro Tem Barney, and then Trustee Barella.
Right, in terms of that we are on question 1, we are supportive of RVs on vacant property. And when it comes to limits on RVs in question 2, where it sounds like we're moving in the direction of 1 RV per parcel, and we haven't yet gotten to the discussion about what parcel means. But in order to indicate that 1 RV per parcel is what we want to do to create some clarity, we'll need to run that by an attorney, because that will constitute a revision to the ordinance. My only question about that, and I'm supportive of this recommendation, if that's the direction we want to go, I was just wondering if, like, boots on the ground in any practical manner, if we know of anyone that this is really going to be problematic for. And I don't mean to call it an individual, just does this seem like it's a problem for people in town right now? And will this like boot somebody out tomorrow? Because that would be problematic for me.
Oh, I guess I should answer that. No, to my knowledge, no one would be booted out. And I wouldn't agree to doing that anyway. I would consider it to be, quote, grandfathered for the summer, unquote. So whatever determined here. What I want to see prevented, though, is someone doing what Mayor Shane said, and that is, oh, well, here's a way of putting 8 RVs on my property and collecting $600 an RV cash, and I don't have any hookups, no water bill, no sewer bill. The trash all goes into my container, and I pay $43.30 every 2 months for trash. That's not going to be very beneficial to our community, although it might provide 8 employee housing. I don't believe the demand is that high. But when Lisa and I started looking at this ordinance, clearly we were anticipating, and we still do, that it could get higher, and we wanted to have some clarity. If we can move forward with determining what a parcel is, which I understand what you guys are saying about that needing a legal interpretation. I would love it if somebody could tell me if we can define that, would that work in applying to question 3 and 4, because that, or 3 especially, because that's the one Lisa came up with as far as what's adjacent property. And that would, a parcel would tie right into that question also. But no, I don't think we would be throwing anybody off, Sally. And I think, and I apologize for using you guys' first names. It's a workshop. But I do think we wanted to bring this to your attention, and I think everybody driving around town is seeing what's happening, and we just want to make sure that you guys are completely clear on this, so that we can be clear on how you want it to and being clarified.
Thank you. Trustee Barella, you've had your hand up for a minute.
Yes, my question was for Bill. How many people have utilized this for the summer and turned in the paperwork?
Oh, that's a great question, Molly. I'd say 2 out of the 10 that I need to collect the paperwork on. You know, I've got a pretty open schedule, so I'll get that done in the next 2 hours. All joking aside, I've been waiting to have this meeting and to determine what you guys are saying, and then we'll go out and I will get that accomplished. And, you know, and we'll get everybody signed up that I believe needs to be signed up, and make sure that they are meeting the interpretation of the ordinance as it's written. So yeah, I'll get that taken care of in the next, respectively within the next, by the end of next week, I hope.
Lisa, and then Trustee George, and then Trustee Birma.
I've been listening to you mention 1 per parcel, but the question was per property owner. And I'm in favor, for what it's worth, of 2C, which is treating every applicant or property owner equally, which could allow up to 2 in certain situations. For example, a husband and wife. In the adopted ordinance, under section B, number 1, it says authorization. Property owner shall provide written permission for employee to park a camper. So it mentions property owner and a camper. So that I would recommend, rather than 1 per parcel, that you consider one camper or RV per property owner, because that treats everyone fairly and is irregardless of the size of the parcel.
Sounds like a wonderful suggestion.
Yeah, that's what, that sounds like a good idea also, Lisa. And then just a quick aside, I know Bill said that, you know, people would just throw their trash away in the you know, property owner's trash, but it says in the ordinance that campers shall be required to pay the town's transfer fee. How do we enforce that? And especially if we did allow, you know, more than, if we did go the route of allowing more than one, how do you enforce that?
Respectively, guys, that's not going to be enforceable by me because of the time elements involved in it. We need a full-time code officer to take care of these kind of questions, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm being honest with you.
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate that. That's exactly why I asked the question. Thank you.
All right, I have another kind of related thing, and if it's off topic or off track, feel free to let me know otherwise. But I remember about a week and a half ago getting some emails from Katie and Janice about I don't know whether it would fall in the purview of this ordinance or not. It's kind of the reverse of the situations we've been talking about. I think it was an employee staying in a workshop that had minimal facilities but no hookups. And I don't know if that would fall within this realm or if that code enforcement.
And I had read Lisa's letter to them about why it wasn't allowed, and I felt like that was a pretty thorough and comprehensive reply, but Lisa could probably speak to that better.
The situation that you're referring to what came to our attention from a complaint, and we have some wonderful people that are living in a shed, and there's no water and sewer, and the shed is not legally defined as an RV. An RV is a licensed vehicle on wheels with self-contained utilities. So to classify a shed as an RV would require an amendment of this ordinance.
No, thanks, Lisa. I think I must have missed your response because that was. Thank you.
Trustee Barella?
That almost seems more like an ADU, like it's being converted. And so that would probably fall more under the ADU purview. So, but do we have anything that says you can live in it while you're developing your ADU? Question mark. I don't remember if we did or not.
Trustee Barella, I offered to help and would recommend approval of converting that shed the right way into a proposed residence. It's a non-conforming parcel that doesn't meet the regulations, and that's a parcel that was created last year. So we have some zoning issues with that site, and I would be happy to see that shed converted the right way into some sort of a dwelling unit. And it does happen to be multifamily zoning district. However, the town regulations require all dwelling units to have water tap and sewer tap and water and sewer service lines. And there's a bit of a gray area, perhaps in the state codes, 14 to 20 days. But right now, the town staff is not allowed to let someone live off grid in the shed, or I'm sure many people would like to do that. And we really have a critical housing issue, but we have certain codes that prevent us from allowing that. And the shed not being classified as an RV is slightly different than the items in this ordinance. So I would be happy to help the owners of that shed get the paperwork in order and legally convert that shed on a non-conforming parcel into a dwelling unit with utilities that are required in the code.
I'm
Great,
definitely
Lisa.
supportive
I
of
think that
resolving that issue, but this is definitely off topic for this conversation. So if I could redirect us back to the ordinance so that we're not here super late. I apologize for interrupting.
I would just like to state that we have, I won't say procrastinated, but we have hold off on enforcing that code, but we will be enforcing that in the next few days. And those individuals are going to have to move out of that shed. And we don't have a choice. Those are the way the town codes read, as you heard Lisa say. And setting that precedent is really opening up a very difficult situation that I don't think anybody wants to have happen around town. And I'm not so sure we're not in violation by allowing that to happen of some Colorado State Health Department codes also.
Again, I just would like to redirect us back to the RV ordinance.
I would be happy to report that now that it appears you decided that vacant parcels are eligible to have an RV, that log shed could have an RV pulled in next to it and then everything would be in compliance.
Thank you, Lisa.
So I just wanted to clarify a couple things, bringing us back to these questions in front of us. And just asking you all if, I mean, I know we're going off topic a little bit, and of course discussions are going to do that, but do we want to answer these questions tonight? Do we want to come up with a yes or no? Okay, all right. So, and it sounds like for 2021, we will, well, we propose to allow employee RVs can be parked on, occupied on vacant parcels. Is that correct? Okay, seeing lots of heads shaking. Excellent. And then for our second question, is limiting the number of occupied seasonal employee vehicles to one property owner. Lisa's suggestion, everyone seemed to agree on that one. The language or intent adopted regulations only permit each property owner to have one occupied seasonal employee RV. Therefore, if a husband and wife own 2 lots, then they would have 2 RVs. Is that where I'm seeing everyone in agreement? Excellent. And then for our third question, this one's a fun one. If a landowner owns 10 lots, lots 1 and 2 have an existing residence, the other 8 lots are vacant and located across a public right-of-way, are the vacant lots adjacent to the existing adopted regulations? The existing adopted regulations do not define adjacent. So this is where we are asking for clarification on what adjacent is. And so does that mean that given the lack of seasonal employee housing, if a landowner's adjoining vacant lots are directly across the alley or directly across the street from their existing residence, that is close enough to qualify as an adjacent, and those vacant lots shall be deemed adequate for providing space for seasonal employee RVs? Yes,
Yeah,
go
Trustee
ahead.
George.
That's answered by 1 and 2 now, isn't it? Because we will allow RVs to be on vacant lots, and one landowner can have 1 RV.
If that is you, yes. So if that is how you interpret that, then yes. Great. And then regarding question 4, would you like me to read it? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Regarding RVs occupied by a lot owner, when the lot owner is not a seasonal employee, a hypothetical scenario, a person owns 2 or 3 vacant lots in town. They may or may not work in town for the summer. They might work in Durango or might even say that they are self-employed. According to the existing town regulations attached, are they allowed to park and occupy a self-contained RV on their vacant parcel for 20 days this summer? So the county is rather restrictive, yet the county allows for up to 20 days of camper occupancy on a person's private land, whether or not it has a structure on it without any kind of county permit. Does the town currently allow the same? One part of the municipal code, namely section 16-5-30, attached states, each occupied residential property shall be allotted a total of 20 camper days. Do you believe that it is the intent of the adopted town regulations to be more restrictive than the county regarding unregulated self-contained RV occupancy on a person's vacant parcel with a 20-day annual limit.
Trustee Barella?
We recently passed a parcel of land. It was brought to us as a board, and this gentleman owns the land, and he wanted to be able to pull his Airstream on there. I'm sure you all remember that. We passed it because he said he would put up a fence and do a lot of other things. So you can't, with the precedent is already there. So can we tell this person he's got to put up a fence? Because we've already passed somebody doing the exact same thing. He doesn't always live here. It was short term. He was not self-employed, but wanted to be here during the time frame that he was here. And then he even asked to be able to let his friends come on. And we did pass that. So that's a very slippery slope right there with that last question based on what we've already done.
Molly, let me clarify that. The only reason that was approved is it was in an avalanche red zone.
Well, but yeah. But does that really matter right now with the way that this is written?
Go ahead, Lisa, sorry.
You're the trustee and you can go first.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say it matters to me because he's not able to build a permanent structure there.
So in the hypothetical, has somebody actually come, or is this strictly hypothetical?
We do have people that would like to come here for the 4th of July and, you know, in general, and, you know, they come up with an Airstream and they park on the 2 lots that their family owns that they haven't got around to building on yet. And they might park there for 3 days or 10 days. And they don't think much of it because they own the land. And the county does allow that. And the county's pretty strict. And so we're not quite sure sometimes what to tell people like that. Part of the code seems to allow it, and part of the code seems to point us towards telling them no. But it frankly seems pretty strict. If somebody owns a block or some lots and they want to pull an Airstream or camper onto it for a few days over the 4th of July, Bill and I aren't really sure. It seems like we're supposed to tell them no, but we're not quite sure if that is what the town board would like us to do, or perhaps that's pretty overkill. The county is awfully strict, and they let people camp on private land for up to 20 days. And it's my understanding that after that, there's some state septic regulations that become an issue after 20 days. It would be helpful to me and Bill to have clarification from the town board that because we want to do the right thing. We want to do what you guys want us to direct people to do. It seems to me that we should pick 4B, and once in a while when people want to pull a camper Airstream up to 20 days at the most, has to be self-contained. Otherwise, Bill and I look all over town, and every RV we see pretty much is in violation. And we're supposed to go out there and tell them to get off their own land, if that's what you want us to do.
I like 4B.
I agree. I'd like to see us aligned with the county. It just seems less confusing, easier to administer.
Thank you all for that direction. We really appreciate it. And it sounds like we will have to have another conversation on the ordinance itself. But for moving forward, this has really helped staff.
Great. Any other questions for us relating to these items, or any other questions or comments from trustees on these items? All right. Well, thank you all for a very productive work session. Have a wonderful night. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
all.